Welcome to Module 3.1, Feedback. I'm Chris Dupont, a practice development pharmacist from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, and I have the honor and privilege of introducing this month's group discussion. To introduce the topic, I'd like to start with a reflection. Building off of Lindsay's intro video was this idea that many of us, if not all of us, we weren't trained how to provide effective feedback. Rather, it's something that we just learned how to do over time. Still learning. And in that is the distinction that being a great clinician and being a great preceptor, well, those are two different skill sets. And the only way we get better at precepting is by doing it. And so the logic follows with feedback. Same thing, right? Learn by doing. Careful self-reflection. Seeking feedback, coaching feedback from our peers, students, and residents. Trying to identify our blind spots and filling them in over time. Now, before we get into the tips of feedback and models to consider, I'd like to ask a fundamental question on this module. And that is, what is feedback? Now, I've evolved my thoughts on this many times over the last 2 years. And I encourage all of you to have a beginner's mind and be open and curious about this profound question. Now, the most concise and clear answer that I've come across is that by Doug Stone and Sheila Heen in their book, Thanks for the Feedback. Now, you don't have to read this book to complete this module, but if you haven't checked it out, I'd add it to your reading list. It's fantastic. In fact, Adam Grant, a well-known organizational psychologist, gave the following endorsement. He said, "Thanks for the Feedback is a potentially life-changing look at one of the toughest but most important parts of life, receiving feedback. It's a roadmap to less defensiveness, more self-awareness, greater learning, and richer relationships," end quote. Quite literally, I think that this book can make you a better friend, a better colleague, a better spouse, partner, and human being. And on that cheery note, let's get into the lesson plan.
Okay, so I made a few slides for us. So in learning objective 12 is explain the value of feedback in experiential healthcare education and describe approaches for introducing feedback concepts to learners. This is an important question for you to answer as it relates to the story you tell yourself about your role as a preceptor and what falls within your responsibility. So to answer this question, I provided you with a very brief 2-page outline that summarizes a very small part of Sheila and Doug's book. Do you agree with their perspective? Do you always make sure to include appreciation, coaching, and evaluation as part of your preceptorship? A second point is, well, what feedback models or approaches do you typically use? And as a disclaimer, each feedback model has its pitfalls and strengths to consider. That's part of the art and science of feedback, right? The science is knowing the options of different models to consider, and the art is knowing which one to use when and how, and why, depending on the learner in front of you. So Orsini and colleagues are going to describe some common feedback models used in healthcare, and they do emphasize a recurring theme, and that is that feedback is most effective when delivered as a dialogue rather than a monologue. Were you familiar with any of these models, and which do you use yourself? Now, learning objective 13 is identify common challenges and barriers to providing or receiving feedback in experiential healthcare education. So for this learning objective, we ask you to consider both the preceptor and the learner perspectives, appreciating both sides of the interaction. And along with identifying general challenges and barriers, consider sharing personal experiences as a preceptor. And how did you handle these situations? In the watch section of the lesson plan, you will listen to Leanne Reniger, who offers a feedback model very similar to UBC's 4 parts of speech, another model to consider. Joe Hirsch invites you to strongly consider participating in feedback as a dialogue, not a monologue. Imagine feedback not as a window gazer, one direction trying to force a change, but rather a mirror held to provoke an insight in your learner. And the last video provides some insight into how learners metabolize feedback differently. Now, this slide in particular is for the residency program directors of the group, but it's beneficial for everyone. And it's that providing effective feedback includes so much more than the specific moment in time you are sharing your appreciation, coaching, and evaluation, but it also includes how you set the activity up. So for many of you that have a lot of years of experience, most of the day you're spending doing what Daniel Kahneman calls type 1 processing or intuitive reasoning, right? You have pattern recognition. It's automatic. It's fast. You're just working up your patience. You know what to do. You have the mental scripts. This is in contrast to our learners who do analytical reasoning, which is slow and methodical, and they don't have the pattern recognition. So if you're finding early on that most of your feedback is pointing out what is missed, then perhaps that is a clue to consider or reconsider how you set the activity up and support your learner. So rather than, hey, go work up this patient and present them to me in the afternoon, or perform this particular task, consider taking a few minutes to discuss what info they should gather and what's the clinical reasoning behind that info before said task. That way your learner is much more likely to have all the relevant information necessary to make a clinical judgment and decision. And your feedback sessions are spent less on what is missed and more on them putting it all together, right? The assessment, the monitoring, the recommendations, the follow-up.
Look forward to reading your group discussion posts. And I hope that you share what challenged you, what did you disagree with, and what would you like further discussion amongst the group members. Now, asynchronous learning sessions, they do make it challenging to have a real dialogue because we're all in different time zones. And so, if you could please write in a way that fosters group discussion, that would go a long way to building our community of preceptors. Thanks.